Go ahead and start.
So, Joe, are we on?
Yeah, you're live.
We're ready to go. Okay, hello, everybody. That was an awkward start. Sorry about that. Hey, Happy New Year to you. I know it's almost, January's almost over, but this is the first time we've been able to get together since I think late or early December. So it's a new semester. We've got a legislative session that is already 2 weeks or so into it. We're already thinking about commencement. It really is amazing how time passes so quickly. And it just reminds me about how much I appreciate everybody and what they do on our campus to make this campus so interesting for our students and supportive and such an interesting place to work. And on that note, I think it would be, we would be really remiss not to take an opportunity to talk about how the Staff Association, you might know this, has kind of a peer process of recognizing other staff members on campus. And we're really super happy that that Lisa Jones in our controller office in Richfield and Fernando Montana, and as our director of inclusion and equity, and then Petra Brickner, who's in our current enrollment, were staff employees of the semester. So thank you so much for all that you do, you three, and thanks for those nominations. It's a great recognition. It means a lot when your peers actually recognize the good that you do. So congratulations, Lisa, Fernando, and Petra. We have a special guest with us today. I'd like to introduce him. He's really doesn't need an introduction. He's arguably one of the most influential legislators that Central Utah has ever had. And welcome Ralph Oakerland, who is joining us from his home in Monroe. Hello, Ralph.
Thank you. Yes, hello, everybody. It's great to be with you.
So you may know that that Ralph was a long-time serving senator, very high-ranking, and until he retired from the legislature a couple of years ago. And he has agreed to work with and help Snow College in this legislative session. And I have to say, it is just humbling to see the deference and the respect that legislators have for Ralph. And but I thought it might be interesting for those that might look at the legislative session as a bit of a black box, a little bit of a mystery as to how things actually work, especially as it relates to higher ed. What are the things that Snow College is pushing this year, and really to be kind of have a Q&A from the campus with Ralph as to how the legislative process actually gets things done. So we're gonna so just know that last week was a very busy week for Snow College. We had to present twice to the Higher Education Appropriations Committee. The first on Wednesday, where we presented, Stacy and I presented our technical education budget needs and to give them an update on where we are. And then on Friday, Melanie and I presented on our general budget needs, and we're going to go over some of those presentations to kind of share with the campus how the dialogue is being pitched to the legislature, and I think what Ralph can really provide some color commentary as to how these things work. What happens once you make a presentation to the Higher Education Appropriations Committee, then what? But let me just again, I really have grown to be incredibly affectionate And so I respect Ralph so much. You know, he actually, my father was a principal at South Severe High School, and Ralph, one of his very first jobs was a teacher at South Severe High School. But he's gone on to be a mayor, a city councilman, a commissioner, and of course a longtime senator. And I think he represents really the best of engaged citizenship. So Ralph, thank you so much for being willing to help us in this process. So tell us a little bit about what you're seeing from the legislature right now. The legislature is the revenues are pretty good, but that causes other problems. It's kind of a feeding frenzy, if you will. So give us your 2 weeks in. What do you think about how the legislative session's going?
Well, you know, at this point in the session, you start to get a sense for and a feel for what the legislators are going to prioritize, kind of how they're going to work on bills and how they're going to prioritize bills that are coming up now. You've probably seen there is some talk about a tax cut, an income tax cut of 0.1%, and how that might affect the budget. It tells you that the numbers are good. They wouldn't be talking about a tax cut if there wasn't some good revenue numbers. And so you get that indication. Right now, the Higher Education Appropriations Subcommittee has been meeting for 2 weeks. And I might just say what a great job President Cook and Stacy did on technical side on Wednesday, and then President Cook and Melanie on the Friday side. I watched all of those Higher Education Appropriations Subcommittee hearings and saw all of the other different colleges and universities make their presentations and approaches. And I'm telling you, our people are just top notch. It did a great job there, and I was really proud of them and the job that they did in those subcommittee hearings. So we're now at the point in the session where the numbers start to come together. And as we have seen our requests go before the subcommittee and the other colleges and universities make their requests, and we know that there's always going to be more requests than there is money. So the legislators on each of those committees have to start prioritizing and seeing where they can make appropriations that will make a difference for our colleges and universities. Our efforts started long before the session. We started working with Senator Vickers, who is the chair now of Appropriations Subcommittee, all of the Appropriation Subcommittees. In his role, and he has agreed to make a bill request on our behalf that would hopefully make an appropriation to Snow College in the amount of about over $9 million, $9.7 million, plus some additional money that would go to some of the colleges and universities that Snow College works with and it ends up sending students to. So our request, of course, was for the $9.7 million, and we also went and visited with Representative Schultz, who is the majority leader in the House. Senator Vickers is the majority leader in the Senate. Representative Schultz is the majority leader in the House. Each of them agreed to carry these bills in the Senate and the House, this bill that we have requested. We also went before the session and met with the governor. And the governor has in his budget right now $5 million that we think will fit in and work with the amount that we're working with on the bill with Senator Vickers and Representative Schultz. So right now, both the Senate and the House have started passing bills, working on bills, but only for an hour a day. This first 2 weeks of the session, that first 2 weeks of the session, they don't do a lot of bill passage because they're waiting for the committees to catch up. Once the committees hear the bills, then they send the bills to the floor, and that's when they're heard on the floor. Some of these bills that are heard early are those that have been passed during interim during the summer and the fall meetings that the Senate holds each year. So that's just kind of the way the process works. It isn't going very fast right now. You might notice that there's just not a lot of bills passing, and it's because they're waiting for these bills to be able to go before each of the committees, standing committees, where they get an up or a down in the committee. If they get an up, if they pass committee, then they go to the House or the Senate where they start the bill process. So right now, it looks like things are slow. They're going to really start picking up now as both the Senate and the House are going to start working on the floor to pass bills in the morning for an hour, and then in the afternoon for 2 hours. So things are going to really start picking up as it normally does this time of the session. And we'll see a lot of these discussions on these bills move forward. As we see next week, the end of the appropriations subcommittee meetings, they will make a recommendation to the legislature on what they think should be passed. I'm getting a kind of a good vibe from our appropriations subcommittee, the higher ed appropriations subcommittee, that the amount that the governor put in his budget will be in their requests for higher education requests. That being the case, that's an ongoing $5 million appropriation. So we hope that $5 million goes with another $4.7 million that is in Senator Vickers' bill that he's running for us. And between the two, we end up getting to our $9.7 million request. We're working very hard, talking to a lot of people, actually, I think I'm encouraged. I think we're getting good responses from the people we're talking to. They want to help Snow College. They know that we've been falling behind a little bit when it comes to funding, and they want to be able to see us be able to reach some other goals that the president has been talking to them about Snow College being able to do some other very important, innovative things, and move our agenda forward. And I'm frankly encouraged right now. You don't know until the last night when the final numbers come in and both houses pass bills and they go before the governor. You just don't know where it's going to end up. But I'm encouraged where we are in the process right now. 2 weeks in, I'm just hearing good things from people and others who are asking questions, saying, "How can we help?" So I'm encouraged and look forward to getting through the rest of this process and seeing where we end up the last night.
Well, Ralph, you're working really hard for us. He's up there almost every day, and that's not easy. But it must be, as a legislator, if there's any time that the state can really do something for Snow College, it's probably going to be this year. Yeah. Corporate taxes are up considerably. Even personal income tax revenues are up, and of course, a lot of the, another request that we're going after is a building of about $23 to $24 million. I kind of thought that was, we'll share this with the group in a minute, but I really kind of thought our building didn't have much of a chance this year after going through the board prioritization process. But we've been asked to present to the IGG committee next Friday to talk about our building. And the fact that it's on there is some sense that that our building could be funded too. Talk to us a little bit about what IGG is and what do they have to balance?
Yeah, so the IGG committee is the one that hears all of the building requests, and every year, of course, there are a lot more requests than they have money for as well. But a couple of years ago, the legislature passed a bill that said every year there will be $120 million that we set aside that is going to go towards building requests for higher education. So that $120 million for the past couple of years, we've made requests, and we haven't made that $120 million cut, even though our building is in such bad repair that it has to be shown as one of the number one needs in the state. So this year, the idea is that I think they're going to put a little bit more money in than the $120 million into IGG. So that committee is made up of both House members and Senate members. And the Senate chair is Senator Wilson from Cache County. And Senator Wilson has made the comments to a number of people, including myself, that he's very interested in being able to see Snow College's project move forward. So our request of $23 million, we're going to make that request before them again on Friday. And hopefully they're going to throw some additional money in there above the $120 million that has already been put in place for other projects. We hope there's an additional sum of money that goes in there and that we're able to get that building funded. I'm very encouraged again about that. They wouldn't ask us to come in and present on Friday if they didn't have some idea that we can get that building funded, that they were going to have money to be able to fund it. So it's a long ways from a done deal, but at least they're asking us to come in and make a presentation. And that's encouraging to me to be able to see that they're going to add some additional money and maybe be able to get that building done. So that would be that's a one-time request. There's a big difference between one-time funds and ongoing funds. This building project is a one-time fund, and there's some one-time money that's out there, and that's why they're looking at being able to add it to the $120 million that has already been set aside for other projects. So hopefully that one-time fund will be able to meet our building need, and then our ongoing request of the $9.7 million that we have made both to the governor and to leadership of the House and the Senate and the bill going forward would be ongoing of $9.7 million to Snow College, and then some additional funds to some of the other colleges and universities that we work with and partner with. So that's kind of the way that works. There's some confusion about one-time and ongoing funds. And one-time funds are just those that are available for one-time kinds of projects. And the money that's available for it is different than the ongoing funding that the legislature decides that there's going to be ongoing funds to cover some of these ongoing requests. So that's kind of the way that works. And it's a little bit confusing, but the building is one time, and our request for ongoing funding is going to be ongoing.
So we're 2 weeks into it. March 4th, I think, is the last day of the session. So we'll be watching that very closely, spending the time that we need with legislators to make sure they get their questions answered. And I would suggest if anybody that's listening wants to ask questions, we've got a rare opportunity to have a seasoned legislator here. And I do have to say that getting into doors is so much easier with Ralph. Man, he just sort of garners that kind of respect. So let me also just tell you that compensation is a major priority for Snow College right now. For the system is looking between a 3.5% to 5% compensation increase. So that has yet to be settled, but there's been some good sort of some positive indicators that it might be as high as 5%. You might know that's really good news, but it also means that 25% of that is something we've got to come up with. There's a 75-25% split on compensation increases, which we're hoping we don't have to raise tuition to meet that. But just know that compensation is probably our number one priority. The second priority that the system is asking is for $35 million for performance-based funding, and of that $35 million, Snow College by formula gets right around $900,000. So that's another system priority. Then of course our separate priority of about $9.7 million is actually going through a different process because of a bill of Senator Vickers. So that's 9.7, and I'll tell you what that is intended for when we go through this these presentations. We're also looks like Stacy, looks like we're right around $900,000 or maybe close to $1 million on the tech ed side. that would be us by formula as well. Am I right about that?
Not by formula, it's by specific line item requests.
And we're asking for about 1 million?
1.1 million-ish, yes. Mm-hmm.
So and then of course our building, 23 million. So those are our big priorities that we're fighting for. And so I'm wondering, are there any questions that you have of Senator Oakerland and us in terms of the legislative process? And while maybe those questions are being formulated, what I propose to do now is actually do shorter presentations of what we did last week, so you get a sense of what we're asking for. And I'm going to actually ask Stacy McKiff to go through the one last Wednesday, which was on our tech ed. And then after that, then Melanie and I will take on the presentation that we gave on Friday. And then we'll finish up with a bit of a presentation on the new building that we're proposing. So Stacey, you want to go through what we went through on tech ed?
Sure, thanks, President. Can we see the slides, the presentation?
Yeah, I think
okay,
at least I can.
Okay, thanks. So it's been such a pleasure to participate in this process. I've never done this before, and having Senator Oakerland, I just have to call him Senator Oakerland still. It's just, I'm just used to that. And then President too, I found that we have such a great reputation on Capitol Hill, and it's because of people like Senator Oakerland and also the President just up there working really hard for us. So these are some of the points that we made when we presented to the Higher Ed Appropriations Subcommittee. Okay, so what we did is showed that we had proposed to roll out technical education at SNO using 3 phases. It showed that we're already really far down the road on phases 1 and 2, and then just looking for this fall and into next spring to finally really integrate our technical education initiative. So these are the things that we've been working on. These are the programs that we transitioned over to tech ed this year, and so all of those on the top part are programs that we have converted to technical education tuition this year. And then you can see down below, we're going to be transitioning a few more programs. And so what that means is that the barriers, the financial barriers for technical education have been lowered, and in some cases this year removed. Some of the programs are even being offered for 0 tuition. And so I just have to give a shout out to the faculty, because this is really hard, and we're also going through some other changes with alignment across the state. And the faculty have been doing an amazing job, and it's not easy. And then also to our systems people, especially on Terry's team, who have really worked hard to make these things happen. It sounds really easy. We're just going to make the switch over, and it's not easy. And so I didn't mention that at the legislature. We're making it look easy, but I appreciate everybody who's worked really hard on this. We showed some statistics. Thanks to Becky and Micah for gathering this information for us. This is just some information about the enrollment for technical education. And if you look down at this student credit hours produced number, that's almost double the student credit hours produced from last year. Here's just some more kind of general information. We also started talking about the high schools, because high schools are really the feeders through CTE programs into technical programs at the college, and described the diversity of the, well, not diversity, maybe some of the challenges, I guess, that we have in the region with the high schools, and talked about these challenges in terms of housing in Richfield. We know that's a huge challenge. And then also just sort of the perception of what college is. And so we have this quote here from Superintendent Douglas in Sevier County, and you've heard the president talk about this a lot, that a lot of students in high school just don't see themselves as college-going students. And so thanks to the marketing team and Heidi Stringham and all of the people in marketing have been kind of heading up this effort. We hope to unveil soon kind of a marketing campaign that this is college, that technical programs, whether you're out on the farm, you're going to be taking over the family business, you better know how to do that in this 21st century way, and kind of seeing technical education in a little bit different way. So we hope to share more with you as time goes on about that. You may know that faculty in technical education areas listed here know that we're going to be hosting our first ever high school pathway completer awards recognition day. That's going to be next week. So we'll be bringing in people from industry, and we're bringing in these high school completers of pathways, and we're going to have people from advising and registration. Nate Bradley is kind of organizing this day so that on the spot these high school students can sign up for classes, figure out what their schedule is going to look like, and really get on their pathway into Snow College and then into industry. We also talked to the legislators about our commitment to teamwork and our advisory committee, our commitment to our advisory committee and to our industries in the region, and some exciting things that are going on there. Some additional initiatives that we're looking at: partnerships with universities, which Senator Oakerland and President referred to a few minutes ago, and then taking Tech Ed to remote high school locations. And actually over the weekend, well, this past week, Heidi and Jay and Kenley, who does our continuing ed, and I attended a workforce conference, and we think we have some great ideas about how to get Tech Ed to remote high school locations. So it's exciting, and then as we group in micro-credentials, and then our commitment to serving the prison population in the region as well. We talked about some future opportunities. We've been looking at some space in Nephi, and we really hope to flesh out some programming up there, some exciting possibilities on the northern part of our region. And so, as President mentioned, about a $1.1 million ask that includes tuition offset. So again, the programs that we're bringing over to Tech Ed tuition in the fall, we need to get an offset for that from our regular tuition, and then some TE initiatives, mostly bringing on some faculty for some of those new programs we were talking about, a full-time CTE director, and then a student success kind of leader in Richfield as well. And that about wraps it up. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
And while people might be thinking about that, I just want to remind us that by adding the technical education component to the mission of Snow College provides us access to additional resources. So this 1.1 million, we aren't having to compete against that with our, with our credit-bearing, degree-seeking mission, and that's really terrific. That's $1.1 million that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise to be able to serve, those kind of underserved populations. So thank you, Stacy. Are there any questions that you have of Stacy in terms of what's happening down in Richfield, but also some of the ideas that we're pursuing about expanding technical education to different regions? You want to say maybe a word or two about Juab County?
Valley Medical Center has a couple of buildings on their property that we're really interested in looking at for providing some more opportunities. Right now we're in talks with Dixie, to be a different name, but Dixie for now, and we're working with them on possibly a respiratory therapy program, and so it would be a 2+2. And so Melanie and Jay and I have been meeting with those people, but also there's just some really cool opportunities. It's possible that they may even have space for some technical programs in industrial areas. So maybe welding or industrial mechanics, some of those areas that would fit the needs of industry in Juab County. And then of course the medical areas with fleshing out RN and medical assisting. And the idea is that we are distributing these opportunities throughout the entire region, not just on our 2 main campuses. So it's really exciting.
The demographics are pretty clear. As Stacy said, that really the demographics are pushing very hard southwards, And so we're likely to have, you know, and our service county that's going to, you know, bump up right against the Utah County growth is Juab. And so we have to anticipate those kinds of needs, especially around kind of medical assisting, respiratory therapy, some additional sort of health sciences, but also other programs and other industries that are there, which will also, if we have a larger presence, say in Juab County, that actually is a lot closer to Millard County for some folks in Millard County to get where they need to get the kind of education that they need to. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see that? So I'll go through this pretty quickly, but this is what we presented on Friday. So this was everything that wasn't tech ed. See, I'm having a hard time advance. Oh, there we go. So I wanted to remind the Higher Ed Appropriations Committee of the charge that was given to Snow College and me 3 years ago around rural. So I read them a part of the Board of Regents' charge to me, which said Utah's rural residents face barriers to higher education unseen in more traditional community college settings. They must have access to high quality education with options for working learners, support for underserved populations, and opportunities for students that are otherwise limited by time and distance. So I wanted to illustrate to them how rural we actually are. Almost 6 out of 10 of our students that attend Snow College are from rural counties. Now, in our 6 counties, we make up about 45% of our students come up from the 6 counties, which are clearly rural. But we are a destination campus for other rural students. And then you can see the other breakdown along the Wasatch Front and some non-residents. But we are the most rural credit-bearing college in USHE, and we attract a very high percentage of first-generation and Pell-eligible students. And you'll see my point here really is that there needs to be a consideration in the Utah system of higher education for rural, and I'm trying to make a case here that that Snow College actually suffers by formula as we are considered on the same level as Utah State, University of Utah, Utah Valley. So I wanted to remind them about the growth. There's about 15% growth here since 2019. But interesting enough, that growth has come in the way of online. We've grown our online since 2019 about 60%. We've grown our technical education since 2019 about 20% from then. And then our face-to-face only about 2%. But again, the 2% is from a financial standpoint is from a net tuition standpoint is really crucial. But I wanted to remind them that we're a campus on the move. We're a campus that's growing in interesting and varied ways to try and meet the learning needs by developing different learning platforms. But we do that also very well. I mean, we continue to lead. Outside of the University of Utah, we lead the system in student success. And of course, you've heard us talk about how we're recognized nationally. You'll see that there's a bit of a downtick, though, the last couple of years, primarily around COVID, on COVID-related support. We've taken a bit of a bump there. But I do want to remind the campus that as we open the aperture of our enrollment to underserved populations, to non-traditional populations, that number will likely, we hope we can maintain that kind of success rate. But if we open up our students to more opportunities and different kinds of learners, it would be very hard to expect that we can hold those kind of success numbers given the challenges with the new kind of learners we're trying to reach. And I think this will give you a sense that up to now, since really about the last 50 years, we have been primarily a traditional age college. Like 93% of our students are traditional age, which is defined about between 18 and 24. But this is also a stunning number that 4 out of 6 of our students are economically disadvantaged, which means that they qualify for free and reduced lunch, or come from families that are federally supported in some form or fashion. But given the fact that we've primarily been 93% of our students have been traditional age, we haven't over the past. You've heard me talk about this a lot. That what are the students in our region that we're not attending to as much as we could? First gen students, homeschoolers, Native Americans, place-bound students, meaning that they're geographically bound. They're not able to kind of come to a traditional college. So how do we get to them, through online? There's a considerable number of some college, no degree types of students in our region. And then professionals, working professionals, need upskilling and reskilling. We also know that there is some legislation afoot to try and get resources for prison education, in which we have a responsibility for the Central Utah Correctional Facilities in Gunnison. But our argument really is that the future of rural education in Utah lies with the working mother or the working learner, the some college no degree student, the entrepreneur, and other learner populations who have been historically excluded and underinvested by higher education. The way that we plan to go about that is really by using the USHE priorities of accessibility, completion, and workforce. This is the strategic plan, the strategic goals of the system, which we then align our own work with. So I wanted to maybe turn a moment over to Melanie to talk a little bit about accessibility and completion and workforce as it relates to our academic side of the mission. Melanie?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I'll move through these slides pretty quickly because we've had these conversations on campus quite a bit. But in terms of access, we're trying to create more points of access, more options for students to get a degree, to gain an education. And one of those ways is by lowering financial barriers. We've worked out quite a bit in terms of need-based scholarship. We're keeping our tuition dollars low. We are, like Stacy said, offering technical education as college for those who don't see themselves as college goers, keeping tuition costs really low there with the assistance of the state. And then we've been expanding our online offerings. We have our traditional online, we have our accelerated online, and we're moving a lot of our tech ed stuff online as well. So we really, sorry I'm stumbling today, but we really want people to know that you don't have to be here on campus to get a degree. In terms of completion, you all know that we're working really hard to maintain a really strong completion rate. And we've recently implemented Civitas, the data analytics system, to help us identify the students that are most at risk and then provide some really intrusive advising and some really intrusive support so that we can help them succeed. We've also partnered with an online tutoring service so that our students can have 24/7 tutoring access. This is for our face-to-face students, our online students, everyone, in every subject 24/7, which we haven't been able to provide on our own campus. So this is a big boost to our students. And then in terms of workforce, we talked about how we're trying to build stackable sort of places you can step in and step out for education. So micro-credentials, certificates, associates and bachelors, and really selling the idea that the bachelor's is the place to go, but people can step out into the workforce at various locations if they would prefer that option. And then we're also expanding, if you want to go to the next slide, competency-based education. And we are the first institution in the state that has full CBE accreditation. We're actually just a touch shy of being fully accredited. We're waiting for our third report from the Northwest on this, but we're really the only ones doing it. And this is in the way that we're doing it, where we're securing transfer, financial aid, we're securing credit hour. So we're doing it in a way that enables students to have more access and more opportunities, and ultimately more completions. And I'm just going to stop there because, President, I want them to hear what you were saying, that you made such an articulate and fierce presentation on our behalf. And that's much more interesting than what's happening in this arena. So I'm going to turn it back to you.
One other thing that we are arguing for is that Central Utah also, in addition to tech ed, in addition to sort of certificates and associate degrees in our region, we need more four-year degrees for our students. Now, we're not likely to get, I mean, we are going to probably put forward one or two more of our own, but we really think that the legislature is interested in giving us some money for 2+2s for some of these programs on the left there. In fact, that was one of the things that Senator Vickers was interested in, is how do we, how can you offer maybe a four-year degree in Ephraim or in Richfield that is from, say, Utah State or from SUU, and that will require resources, because we'll have to hire faculty that might have joint appointments, because you probably talk to students like I do and ask them, if their major and if their degree was offered at Snow College, would they stay? And we did a survey in 2020 that 96% of the students said yes, they would stay. People want to stay, and it's our rural families that get hurt the most by not having access to education along the full spectrum. And so College has an obligation to provide some four-year programming where people then don't have to travel to the Wasatch Front to get their education, and then possibly not come back because their internship and networking occurs there. So one of the arguments that we feel the legislature needs to be very clear on is that Snow College operates under what we call a degree of difficulty, right? You think about the athletics, diving, for example. Some dives are just harder than others and ought to have some sort of compensatory factor as to them pulling for Snow College to pull off the same sort of mission as four-year regional universities that have more resources. So one of the things we wanted to put out there, that there are pressures on our budget. One is that we have limited academic offerings, right? And limited in the sense that we offer certificates and associate degrees and our two bachelor's degrees, which we're very proud of. But we're up against competitors that offer a whole range of both certificates, associate degrees, four-year degrees, and graduate programs. So that's difficult to compete. We suffer by budget formulas, and you've heard me talk about this before. That the formulas that the state has are growth-oriented and based on percentages, and calculated on existing budgets. And so as long as there is the increases are based on percentages, then Snow College will, because it's smaller, will always get a smaller part of the pie. So you essentially have the rich get richer and the poor don't. We also compete for marketing messages with in-state institutions that are larger and better funded. And our talent, right? So our faculty and staff and even our students, we actually compete for the same kinds of talent as institutions that might be in a metro or urban context. And yet our compensation is the lowest in the state, and we are the most teaching intensive institution in the state. And we ask that Snow College be recognized about its teaching intensive commitment. Another factor that set of factors that put budgetary pressures on us is that we have fewer opportunities to generate revenue. We don't have the same kinds of funding entities that larger universities do. We have a very, very good grant writing enterprise here, but we do it on with very few resources, but we punch way above our weight. I really am so grateful for all those that are part of this. But when it comes to grant writing, you know, you're looking at, when I was at Southern Utah, they're pulling in 20 million a year or so in grants, and of course the big institutions that are research based are hundreds of millions. But just the fact that that they have those kind of access to those kind of resources shows that there's some uneven playing field. The athletics, our athletics program, as good as they are, don't have the kinds of broadcasting or conference revenue that larger programs have. We have limited access to name donors and sponsors compared to those that have an urban alumni, and but we do have some great supporters, believe me, and yet, especially at a place like Snow College, as students go on for their education, often identify with their baccalaureate institution rather than their two-year institution. So we do fight for a fraction of the alumni annual giving of the universities. Now, again, I want to remind you that we were asked by the system, well, what happened? And you've seen this, but let me just remind you what this represents. What this represents is that we have been teaching about 2.7% of the system's higher education students in 2009, and now we're above that. We're closer to 3% of teaching of the system students. Yet we've dropped in terms of our percentage of budget from 3.1 down to a little above 2.8. So in other words, while we've held the share of our students, our share of the budget has dropped considerably. This is just another way to look at this, that since the 2009 recession, you've seen that the USHE institutions have bounced back further, and you can see this sort of this disparate delta here that that continues to go unless something happens. So the consequences really have been compensation of suppression. We've got lower operational budgets than our comparative institutions around the country that are our type and size. And we also have a very critical position shortage. A lot of we're working without positions that we should be having, and that's put a lot of pressure on existing staff and faculty that end up having to wear multiple hats. So we're essentially asking, this is where the 9.7 million, and a white paper has been produced and it's been circulated, and this is where that 9.7 would break down. We think that there's right about 4 million that not only would go to our full-time staff and faculty, but we've got to also increase our hourly wages, and we have to also increase our adjunct wages. Right now we're at $800 a credit hour for our adjuncts, and we're competing against institutions like Utah Valley that are offering $1,100 to $1,200 a credit hour. So we've got to sort of get in front of that. We're about $2 million short of where we ought to be with current expenses and with our operational dollars, and about 3.5 short with critical positions. So what this is sort of an argument that we talk about is there's a difference between being treated equally and equitably. So you can see the difference here, that one argument is that, hey, Snow College, you get your percentage, right? You know, and therefore, just be happy with it. But you can see that that's not really helpful, as opposed to understanding that some institutions need equity funding, and so we're asking for that 9.7 as an equity ask to fill the budget gap that we feel needs to be there for a healthy mission. And I wanted to remind them that the state actually already acknowledges that it's difficult to scale rural, and in fact, in the K-12 system, there is an element in the public education budget called NES, necessarily existent small schools. This is a built-in budget adjustment for institutions that are rural, so that have extra costs relative to transportation, relative to delivering to smaller numbers of students. So the legislature has already acknowledged that there is an equity factor that needs to be built in to K-12. We're not asking for NES per se, but we are asking for consideration, and that's where and we're hoping that's where the 9.7 million can come in. I'm going to go right into our capital development project, and I'm going to see if this works. And I'm not sure whether you can hear this, but it's a film that we did, and I'm going to try and narrate it if I can. So hold on. Can you hear that, Melanie? All right. So we've got this really scary music playing in the background, but we're actually talking about 2 buildings to take down: Greenwood Hall, as well as then our family science building. What you're seeing here is in Greenwood Hall. That was an actual office. You can see, if you've been in Greenwood Hall, it really hasn't had any updates since the 80s or 90s, and you can see that it's been sort of patched together for years. There are questions relative to safety. There are questions relative to exposed wires and seismic questions. This has been there's a problem with the roof. That roof, we're going to have to replace that roof and this one at about $250,000. The Family Life building, is almost 80 years old as well, built in 1937. You see cracks in terms of settlement. You can see that furniture and fixtures are old. And come back to this, and then had just in our roof. This unfortunately is the building in which our I wanted to show this. It's actually still found. Just look at the bathrooms are, and the sewer has been just a chronic problem. This was built on a Pioneer septic tank, as you can see here, and this, in our opinion, is a bit shameful as to why the building is still there. But the building plans really are to replace the Family Life building and the Greenwood Hall and demolish those, and then we'd repurpose the current social science building, because the social science faculty would be moving to the new building, the Center for Rural Studies and Community Development. And the idea right now is that the social science building be repurposed and be able to move our math functions in there. We're looking at about a $23 million building. You've seen these numbers before, but one thing that which really bugs me is this 10-year history of capital development monies, and you can see very clearly that Snow College has received by far the most capital development monies in the last decade. You've seen some of this, but I just wanted to again remind us of how bad this building is, and it just flat out needs to come down. Let's see, now how do I get it? Okay, so, all right, am I back now? So let's pause there a minute. There's a couple of questions, and then it looks like Marcy, you handle this. The question is, what is the distinction between graduation and completion? And in fact, do you want to maybe answer that for the group, Terry?
Yeah, sure. So the difference between graduation and completion they're kind of the same thing, but with completion, we also include all of the certificates that are awarded, as well as those that transfer to four-year institutions to finish out their education.
Hey, while you're talking, can you give us a quick update on enrollment?
Absolutely. Let me pull up really quickly my my dashboard. So as we've been looking, we're now 3 weeks into our spring semester. The great news is we're up over spring last year, which is super exciting. Spring tends to be a little bit worrisome because especially with going home for the winter holidays, things like that, I get a little nervous that students may not come back. But looks like we're just almost 300 students above where we were last spring, which is really great. The good news is we retained more students from fall than we originally had thought we would. So we're coming in with a fairly strong spring, and we really have to attribute that to, you know, our 14 on Us, or the Up to 14 for Free campaign, as well as the fact that our faculty and staff have done such a great job at interacting with students and keeping them engaged. As the president mentioned earlier, we have seen a really big increase in our online. And so I want to turn a little bit of time over to Diane Johnson so she can talk about the online enrollment initiatives, as well as like Accelerated Online and Snow Online.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Thumbs up, perfect. I'm really excited to share this information because it helps us know what our students are doing and some really interesting numbers that we have. The number of students at Snow that are taking at least one online class. So that means that they have a mix of on campus and then at least one online is 1,479. Our online only students, meaning that they're only taking online classes, 452. The total number of credits being taken online at Snow is 8,241. We have 459 AOL students, and we have 13 students who are helping us with our competency-based education pilot. So I think it's really interesting to see what our students are doing, why they're doing it, and I just want to give a shout out and appreciation to all of the faculty and department heads who are helping us to determine how we responsibly move forward into the online space and can really help Snow grow. And so anyway, really interesting to see what our students are doing, and I really appreciate all the support.
Terrific. Well, thank you. There was a question about will a recording be available for those that were unable to watch from the beginning, and the answer is yes. And we've got planned to kind of post these on our office webpage, so you'll get a chance to see that. And also, if you want to tune in next Friday for the IGG presentation, we only have, what, Ralph, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes at most. Looks like you're on mute there, Ralph.
Sorry, President. I was looking at a potential agenda. It may be a little bit more than that now, since there are only 4 presentations, but usually they move through that pretty quickly. So we have to plan on being able to move quickly through that.
Okay, that sounds good. Another question that came up is what happens to the daycare if the building gets torn down? And we are contemplating the daycare being in that building, in the new building. So what we haven't figured out just yet is, and if we're fortunate to get the building funded, by the time it's going to take about 18 months probably to build what we do for one academic year. So we'll continue to think. We'll continue to think through that. What other questions are on, I think, the campus's mind that we can maybe address? You know, I don't know whether Marcia, we're trying to get Rob Nielsen to patch in, but we're having a hard time having him connect to Teams here. But do you want to give a quick update on the latest numbers, our COVID numbers?
Sure, I can do that. Before I talk about COVID, I just wanted to let our employees know this is such a crazy busy time of year for our office, and we get to give data they ask for and also tell our story. And I hope our employees know what an advocate we have. President Cook, Stacy, came back from her presentation with that same report that legislators really are responding to him, and with his teamwork and with Ralph up there, they're doing good things. So thanks for what you're doing for us on the Hill. For COVID, we're still working through that COVID cares team. We continue to call students, and we are limited in our tests, and so we are only testing people who are symptomatic at this time. We're not sure when we will get additional tests. We have requested them. As of this morning, we had 15 students who were in their first 5 days, and 54 students who are in that day 6 to day 10 time frame. So we are encouraging everyone to stay home if they're sick, and hopefully we can get some more tests and continue to help keep everyone safe and healthy.
Well, I think we're kind of winding down on some of the things that we wanted to cover. We potentially it could be a very, very good year for Snow College, or it could be a really, really great year. I think that that things are. I think we're going to be able to make some progress here in lots of ways, but we just don't know how that's going to shape up exactly until really March 4th. You know, Ralph, you may want to talk about that. Last night just seems like it's a bit of it's bananas. Talk to us about what happens at the end of the session there.
Yeah, from a really realistic standpoint, it is totally bananas. That last night, you get to the point where you have a lot of bills that have gone through committee by that point. They're on the board. In other words, going to be considered by both houses, and both houses are trying to get those bills through that they are prioritizing. And so it gets to the point where you have people talking as fast as they can talk and going right up against the clock, knowing that at 12 o'clock, the gavel is going to pound and the session is over, whether their bill is through or not. So it really does get competitive, and it's a crazy process. I'll talk about our bills and the appropriation process that last day. By then, the numbers are set. We know exactly what the revenue is going to be. So executive appropriations has to finally start saying, okay, this will fund, this we won't, this will fund partially, this we won't fund at all. It's really a process of what comes down to the most important things that the legislature wants to fund. And the interesting part about our process this year is that we have a bill that's starting in the Senate. It could pass the Senate as early as probably 10 days to 2 weeks from now, and then it goes over to the House. The House has a little bit different process. Their appropriations bills go to rules, where rules will hold them, and potentially the speaker could hold them till the end of the session, so they don't get heard in the House. So it really becomes a political battle at that point to get your bill heard in the House, and it could really go down to the last hour, the last couple of hours of the session to see what gets passed and what doesn't. And the House is going to be the tough part for us simply because of their process. They hold the appropriation bills until the last minute, and then they all compete against one another to see who gets funded. There are requests out there that I know of for 150 million, 120 million. A guy was telling me the other day, he said, I could sure use your help on a bill. We're trying to get 74 million from the leadership, and we don't know if we're going to be able to get it. And I told him, I'm really busy. Sorry, I've got my own issues I want. But they're just some really large requests because of the idea out there that there has been a lot of federal money that's available this year, and so there's lots of money out there to be spent. And executive appropriations, it's going to come down to really some tough negotiation that last week of the session to see what makes the final cut. And so that's just kind of the way the process works. It's tough. It's very difficult for those of us who are up there advocating. It's gruesome because it's a kind of a waiting game. I think we're in very good shape in the Senate. Again, I'm a little bit less optimistic, although I'm still optimistic in the House, just simply because of our sponsor and the people that we've been able to get to agree to help us. And I might point out that Senator Owens has done a really great job in being involved in this process and helping wherever he can, talking to leadership in the Senate. And also he came from the House, if you'll remember, before he got into the Senate. So he has some great contacts in the House as well. And then our House representatives have been really great to say, you know, we're going to help you all we can. We're going to talk to everybody we can. So Representative Blunt, Representative Albrecht, and others are saying, you know, they're going to help us as much as they can. So I'm certainly not pessimistic about the House, but I'm a little bit less optimistic than I am about the Senate.
Yeah. Well, we are just so lucky to have you as our advocate up there, and it's just terrific. Just some other news, just to keep you posted. You might remember last time we met. There's also about $100 million that it was earmarked for enhancement of labs, right? So this actually started out, I think, as a way in which the University of Utah State have a high research component that they would upgrade some labs. Luckily, we're able to kind of get that more distributed more broadly, and part of our formula. We may get somewhere about $2.5 million of one-time money to upgrade some of our lab spaces. So we'll be watching that pretty closely as well. We've been doing quite well on the fundraising side of the House, and that we were able to pull in about $750,000 that's earmarked towards international and growing our international students over the next 3 years. A family who wants to stay anonymous on that, but that's going to be allowing us to really expand international students both on the Richfield campus and Ephraim. Of course, Richfield is still our housing challenges down there, and we're working through. It's a very tough slug to try and get these projects going, housing projects down in Richfield, but we're going to keep going. We also ended up getting, thanks to Eric and Chandra Bergeson, you may remember them. They provided the sort of a private gift for the BAC building, our Bergeson Athletic Center. They've also stepped up with $250,000 for we can actually buy a bus. We're going to have a Snow College bus. It's going to be wrapped, and it'll be for athletics, for performing arts students, our student leadership, whoever. You know, we spend about $100,000 just in athletics on chartering buses every year, and we can now channel those resources back into other priorities. Men's and women's wrestling is going to go forward. We are going to actually do it in Richfield. We may start out with a smaller team this first year or so until we can get the housing situation figured out. But we have made there's just a lot of energy and interest around the state for both on the men and women's side of that, and it looks terrific. I want to also, yes, I think Senator Owens and the Economic Development team. They're working on a $5 million grant. Stacey, you want to talk a little bit about that, and really there was a $300,000 that came in from a private donor to help us build a kind of a rodeo, multi-purpose kind of ag center. Do you want to talk more about that?
Sure. It's actually an arena, so there would be ag business classes and other ag types of courses over there, some classroom space, and that grant just was submitted today. I heard just a few minutes ago, and so I think it will be the largest grant that we would ever that we've ever applied for, I think is what I heard. We also have a couple of other grants in the works too. Another Good Jobs grant that would go to fund some of the projects we were talking about in Nephi. Also, the respiratory therapy program I talked about would be funded by a grant that the hospital in Nephi would kind of help us with. So lots of opportunities for money out there right now. We hope we can get in on it.
Can I just put a shout out to Emily Peterson for her incredible talents and dedication. She's very, very busy, but she's very, very good. And you know, I'm hoping that we can get these adjustments with this base budget. We can do more with grant writing if we had kind of more support for Emily. I want to say though that whatever we come down with, especially in terms of the equity adjustment for our base budget, we will then have an open conversation on campus about how that's going to be best spent. Right now, the human resources is taking a look at salaries across the campus from where are we in terms of our comparables with our peers. But I would love to have an opportunity where we can, in a way, look at those salaries that that we some ways take. While everybody should get consideration here to get our salaries where they need to be. I'm particularly worried about our lowered salary staff and faculty, and I'd like to have maybe a campus conversation about that, because anytime that we end up getting any sort of compensation increases over the subsequent years, the base of those salaries, of course, yield, if it's a 5% increase this year, a 5% increase on a $35,000 salary is different than if you've got a $60,000 or $70,000 salary. So I really would like to focus in on those that have, so that we can continue to retain our students, our faculty and our staff. Well, I think that's. I'm just going to look around the Hollywood squares here and see if there's anything else that people might want to mention. Melanie, anything on your end that anything about the Aspen? I think we did update them that we did get the Aspen application in. It'll probably be a couple of months before we hear, but the fact that we've been nominated to apply for the prize is a win in itself. But any more updates on the academic side?
No, I think we've covered everything. I did want to mention something that I'm stealing from what I heard at the legislature on Friday, but I thought it was very compelling. We're 690 days from March 19th, 2020, when we went into this crazy. And I was listening to sort of a newscast this morning that talked about, the country is essentially unhinged. We're seeing people behave in ways that we haven't seen in years and years and years. And I'm just so grateful that we haven't seen that here. Our people have just stepped up and met the challenge for 690 days with very few complaints and with a lot of grit and resilience and fortitude. So I'm glad this is where I work.
Yeah, I share that sentiment. Stacy, anything on your end? How about you, Terry? Diane, any final words there? Marcy? I think we're good. And again, I want to thank you, Ralph, for being with us today. Thanks for all you do. We really, I think we may be able to pull something off this year that's never been pulled off, and that would be because of Ralph Oakerland. And so he has done so much for our state, so much for our central part of the central Utah. So it is an honor to work with you, Ralph. So thanks again for all that you do. Okay, listen, if there aren't any other, Marcy, is there anything else? I'm just looking to see if we've missed anything. Just remember, we're soliciting feedback all the time. If you've got ideas and comments, the types of things you'd like to have covered in these kinds of town hall convenings, let us know. Our email, our phones are open, and listen, we're it's hard to believe we're starting to plan commencement now. We're starting to look at commencement speakers. It's just hard to imagine that we're that far along in the year. But it's an honor to work with you all, and have a terrific rest of your week. Bye now.